It's been a year since I first introduced this guy to the world, and I've had a few friends as well as strangers online ask me about who he is, about what his story actually contains, because at this point his lore has gotten so complex, so detailed that of course a few people lost touch with all the stuff that I've come up with over the past year. And since it's been a year, I thought it would just make sense to make an overall lore video. And I'm thinking about making this a more like a several part series, but let's just see how it goes. Seong is a fan character I created for the K-pop Demon Hunters universe. Before I created him, I asked myself what a character I would have loved to see in the movie could have potentially looked like. His story, his appearance, you name it. And I am someone who very much enjoys corporate DILF characters. I'm just outing myself immediately. And essentially, the idea that I came up with was, hey, what if I made a guy who is basically sort of like a contrast character to Bobby? As we know, Bobby is the manager of the K-pop group Heartstrings, consisting of Rumi, Zoe, and Mira, the main characters of the movie, and makes Seong the manager of the Sasha Boys, loyal to Gwi-Ma. You see, the problem at the time was that there were a lot of people, especially on TikTok, who already made Gwi-Ma the manager of the Sasha Boys. Which is of course not really far-fetched, because that's kind of what it seems like in the movie. But the thing is that due to this trope being very common online, people automatically assumed that Seong, my original fan OC, was also Gwi-Ma, like a human version of him. Which is not the case. And I've tried to make it clear so many times, but still people didn't get it, and to this day, a year later, I still get those allegations of like Seong being him. But he's not. There's literally a toxic yaoi ship with him and Gwi-Ma that I'm gonna talk about eventually, but either way. Calm. Niku, calm down. It's fine. But Seong simply just being the manager of the Sasha Boys is not everything that is to his story. And initially I thought I would not even wanna go this deep, because I just thought, okay, let me just make a silly TikTok video, see where it goes. And people went absolutely crazy over it, which I did not expect. And ever since that happened, ever since this post popped off crazy style, I've been having the time of my life, honestly, guys. I swear it's been so much fun. I would say let's just start from the very beginning, because Seong, just like Jinu, is over 400 years old, which means that he has been mortal with Jinu in the Joseon era, back in ancient Korea. Seong was born into a family who was of the Yangban society back in ancient Joseon era Korea. But unfortunately, both of his parents perished in a house fire that occurred when he was still a very young boy. And as a result of that, his Nubi, his servant U-Jin, took over the role of father figure, and he made sure to raise Seong into the formidable man that he was supposed to be in his society. So back in that time, Seong was a notorious warlord, and he had countless won battles to his name. He was considered ruthless, cold, and feared by many people. And at least this is the impression that they got whenever they saw Seong fight in a battlefield. They only knew a half-truth to who Seong was as a human being, as a man. His power did not come from nowhere. In fact, it was actually granted to him, gifted to him, as part of a deal with none other than the Demon King Gwi-Ma himself. You see, deep down, Seong always knew he wasn't really made for war. He never considered himself strong or courageous or fierce. And unfortunately, very bad people in his life only made him believe that even more as time went on. Something like that happening to you is, of course, what results in your shame growing, in your hatred for yourself growing. What also contributed to his growing shame was the fact that he was a closeted queer man living in a heavily Confucian society where essentially being married to a wife and the production of sons as heirs was one of the most important values at the time. He was made to believe by everyone around him, his peers, his relatives, just everyone around him, that his preferences were dishonorable and revolting, and that he had to hide them and reject them. Therefore, he forced himself to be a man that he is simply not. And having to do that does things to you emotionally. As a result of these struggles, Gwi-Ma was able to gain very easy access to Seong's mind. With the help of a certain someone else I can't wait to talk about eventually. Because of these insecurities, Seong early on developed a massive need to prove himself, a massive need to be relevant to everyone around him. He wanted to be the noble man, he wanted to be the respectable warrior, but he just knew that he simply couldn't achieve that by just being himself. Through the growing shame, of course, as I said, Gwi-Ma gained access to Seong's mind, and soon he wormed his way inside Seong's head, being like, hey, I can offer you something great. I can make you the great man that you've always wanted to be. I can replace your heart with my flame. I can surround your soft heart with my power. Of course, Seong was incredibly tempted by that offer. And eventually Gwi-Ma actually gave Seong a literal part of his fire, of his flame. That flame inserted itself into Seong's heart. It surrounds him ever since, and it gives him superhuman powers that he would not have otherwise had. And that turned him into the formidable warrior that he always wanted to be, that everyone expected him to be. Ever since that happened, Seong was known as the warlord, the war general with a heart of fire. One of the unfortunate side effects that come with making a deal like this with Gwi-Ma was that now, every time Seong was angry, every time Seong had to fight, he was taken over by Gwi-Ma's powers. He turned into a ravenous beast. He had no control over his actions. He was not ashamed of shedding blood, killing lots of innocent people in order to achieve victory. And we know that deep down Seong is actually not that man. He's not that guy, if you know what I mean. So every time Seong's mind cleared up after such a battle, he realized what he's done, the sacrifices that he made in order to be the one everyone expected him to be. It just made his shame even worse than it was before, and it led him to this massive downward spiral that Gwi-Ma sort of hoped for, as that's how his deals work. He wants to turn you into a demon. Another very, very deep and personal thing Gwi-Ma sought to exploit was the fact that, as we know, Seong was a queer man who couldn't live out his fantasies, his interests, knowing that it could potentially kill him or lead him to massive dishonor in his society. So he made him another offer. He told him that he could be the man that he always desired, that he could be the rightful king to serve and act as a man to seek pleasure from, to receive pleasure by. The thought of being someone's most trusted general, trusted in a way that goes beyond just loyalty, was something that Seong could not say no to. Short upon having made this deal with Gwi-Ma, having received part of his fire as sort of like a soul bonding ritual almost, Gwi-Ma marked Seong with a tattoo, a flame mark on his chest, and he has had it ever since. He could not hide it. He was marked for eternity, physically on his body, for everyone to see. As I said earlier, Seong was forced into marriage because that was what was expected of him by everyone around him, and the woman he was forced to marry is called Ji-A, and soon Ji-A realized that Seong would never really be able to love her romantically, and of course that also made things incredibly complicated for her because she was expected to carry his child. But Seong just couldn't really give that to her. He couldn't fulfill his duties. And the two of them, they really struggled together, but in the process they also became friends because they both... It was obviously very complicated, And while Seong actually managed to seek out pleasure in private, away from Ji-A, with other men, I'm gonna talk about that later, Ji-A, of course, also wanted something in her life. She wanted to be loved. She wanted to be valued. She wanted to be risen to power. Like, she also had very, very selfish needs. So in secret, she also sought out another man's love, and the both of them did things that were extremely controversial for the time period that they both lived in, but they just wanted to be loved. They wanted to experience being valued, and if they couldn't have that with each other in a way that was expected of them, they just, of course, they would seek it out elsewhere, because otherwise they would never find happiness. Of course, Ji-A as a character also has her own incredibly complex and incredibly sad arc, because of course she would. I just love making tragic characters, and she is a perfect parallel figure to Seong. And I'm definitely also gonna talk about her more once I get into who U-Jin is as a man, because it gets very messed up. Okay, now that we briefly talked about Gwi-Ma's involvement with Seong, let's focus on 4 certain boys that eventually found their way into Seong's life. Those 4 boys eventually ended up with Seong's army, meant to be trained into soldiers even though they were still very young. With another battle, more wars coming closer, Seong wanted to prepare them accordingly, but he just knew that they were not ready yet, and he did not want any harm to come to them. Despite this, the boys kept on insisting on joining Seong for his battles. Seong, however, refused them the right, and he told them to stay behind, and that he will come back in order to train them further. So upon being encouraged by a certain someone, they decided to follow Seong into battle without him knowing. They just wanted to fight. They wanted so badly to be the soldiers that he wanted them to be. That decision did not end well for all of them. Because of the boys' sudden appearance in this battle, Seong was taken aback. He was caught off guard. And now he had to focus on protecting them, because they meant too much to him, and he did not want to have that, which is why he told them not to come. But here they were, and he essentially had to watch all of them die one after another, having been slaughtered by the enemy in many different ways, and seeing these young men pass in front of him was the final blow to Seong, to Seong's spirit, to Seong's will to continue. So with his soul giving up, his spirit giving up, it was the final signal for Gwi-Ma that now he had won Seong over entirely. Therefore, he reached out his hand and made Seong join him in the underworld. Seong accepted, because to him there was nothing left to keep living for in the world of the living. I've mentioned earlier that Seong was basically pushed towards the life that he led by someone, and that exact same someone also encouraged the young boys to join Seong in the battle. If you feel like all of this is very set up in a way, then you are entirely correct. And as I said, I really cannot wait to tell you more about this man called U-Jin. He's the bane of my existence. I hate him so much, he's driving me crazy. So, with all the boys seemingly gone, and with his battle lost, be it the battle that he just fought or the battle that he's been fighting his entire life, by being at Gwi-Ma's side and by sharing Gwi-Ma's bed, Seong was able to live out his most profound desires, his deepest, more depraved desires, if you want to call it that way. Seong considered his existence shameful, and with Gwi-Ma he finally felt that this shameful existence had a purpose. So for the past 500 years, Seong has been acting as Gwi-Ma's executioner, as his general, as his second in command. He commanded demon armies in order to disrupt the Han Moon, in order to gather new souls to feed Gwi-Ma, to feed his king. And therefore Seong also barely ever left the demon realm, unless there was an exception, unless he had to fight actively with the other demons. Because Seong was somewhat of Gwi-Ma's concubine. due to the offer that Gwi-Ma seduced him with initially. However, one has to note that obviously the relationship between the two of them was very exploitative, very heavy-handed, and very abusive. But Seong was a man who explicitly wanted to indulge in this. He wanted to be treated that way because he felt like he deserved it, and he found a lot of pleasure in being handled the way that Gwi-Ma handled him. And due to these deep connections, a lot of the demons feared Seong as much as humans used to fear him in the waking world. So to outsiders, to everyone who viewed their connection from the outside, this seemed very, very toxic and very, very unhealthy. But like I said, you have to realize that to Seong, it never felt that way. I mean, I guess he was aware of the fact that obviously this was pretty messed up, but that is what he wanted. That is what he desired. That is why he joined Gwi-Ma, because he could now live out something that he could not live out in the waking world. So you might have been wondering why I gave Gwi-Ma a physical human form in my AU, and the answer is pretty simple, to be honest. First of all, when I kept getting those comments about Seong being Gwi-Ma, I was just getting tired of it, and I was like, you know what, out of spite, I'm going to design my own version of Gwi-Ma, and this is basically where it all started. And I just had this very clear vision in my head of how I wanted Gwi-Ma to look, and that's eventually the design I came up with. And I think to this day he is one of my favorite characters that I've designed based on an existing character, because like Gwi-Ma is a flame, and because of the voice acting, how he portrayed himself in the movie, I just had this very clear visual image, and I'm really glad with how he turned out. And I'm also so glad that people like him, because I would say he's not quite like the other depictions that you see online. But of course the human form also has another purpose aside from just me having made it out of spite, out of anger, to finally make the allegations stop. They still didn't stop, by the way. In my AU, Gwi-Ma has a very particular fascination for humans. Not just because they are what keep him alive. He is not human, so there's a fascination there, an interest there on how humans behave, and he wants to engage in human pleasures. And what better way to do that than actually find yourself a physical form? Before I yap on too much about Heartburn, which is the name of the ship, by the way, like burning heart, Gwi-Ma's fire within Seong's heart, Heartburn, you know, I think it's time to continue on to the next massive plot point in Seong's story. And it's not going to get any happier, I am sorry to tell you guys. This man's story is so deep, I apologize in advance. During the 400 years that Seong spent with Gwi-Ma, he didn't necessarily make any friends. He's never really had any friends in the living world either, except for his wife, which I also cannot wait to talk about eventually. But however, in the 1980s, when the Sunlight Sisters were the current hunters, the current group of hunters in the human world, Seong eventually befriended a fellow demon, and this demon had a very, very complicated secret. Namely, he actually fell in love with one of the hunters. And this put Seong into a predicament, because he obviously cared about his friend, given that he was one of the only friends Seong ever really had. But he was also Gwi-Ma's most trusted advisor. He was supposed to tell him if things like this occurred. But in this case, his friendship, his love for his friend was stronger than his loyalty. And he kept their relationship a secret in order to protect his friends. But eventually, the love the demon and the human woman had for each other resulted in a child being born. A child half demon, half human. And eventually, due to this, Seong knew that the secret between them could not be kept secret any longer. Gwi-Ma, their king, would eventually find out about that child, and he did. And he wanted that child, that half-demon girl. But her parents did not want this girl to have her father's fate, being bound to Gwi-Ma for eternity. She was literally a baby, after all. She was just born. They wanted a good life for her, and Seong understood. Yet still, he was actually tasked by Gwi-Ma to bring him the child. And this was the first time in 400 years where Seong actively defied his own king. He refused to follow this order because his love for his friends was stronger than Gwi-Ma's will. So he did not give Gwi-Ma the child. And while this was happening in the human world, another hunter found out about the existence of this child, and that hunter was Celine, another member of the Sunlight Sisters. And Celine could not bear the thought of her friend, her fellow hunter, having bedded a demon man, having gotten a child with that demon. So despite the very obviously visible love between the two, Celine sought to kill the demon, to rid the world of this demon, because she just couldn't bear the thought of something this disgusting having happened. They swore an oath hunters were supposed to kill demons, and now her friend was in love with one of them. So during a very, very sad and very, very unfortunate fight between the three of them, between Celine, her friend, her fellow hunter, and the demon man that she was in love with, Celine, in an attempt to kill the demon, accidentally stabbed her friend because she put herself between Celine's blade and her lover. And as a result, the both of them died, and now the half-demon baby had lost their parents in one strike. And the demon man, the hunter's lover, knew that this was not gonna end well for them, so before this showdown, he asked his friend, he asked Seong to please protect Rumi and make sure that she lived a good life. And Seong at the time did not know what that good life would look like, because there were two options. There were either the option of handing the child to Gwi-Ma, which he did not want to do, and handing the child to Celine. And Celine would hate the child. She would always hate this child because this child should have never existed. And eventually he had to decide to choose the lesser of two evils, and that lesser evil was handing the child to Celine. Because in the end, the human world would always be kinder to Rumi than the demon realm would have been to her. And by actively deciding to hand the baby to Celine instead of Gwi-Ma, Gwi-Ma lost his mind. He realized that his most trusted advisor, Seong, betrayed him, that his lover betrayed him. And So as a result of these actions, Seong was actually shunned by Gwi-Ma for several years after that. He was stripped of all his duties, of all his honor, and as we know, Seong is incredibly driven by the need of proving himself, so now that he lost the chance to do so, he felt absolutely worthless, because the sole reason for why he initially wanted to join the demon realm willingly was because Gwi-Ma gave him a reason, you know, and now he didn't have that anymore. And this is something I haven't even brought up with my friends yet or discussed publicly, but I had the very devastating thought that during this time Seong almost turned into a faceless demon. And faceless demons in the K-pop Demon Hunters universe are essentially people that lost everything. They lost their identity. Their spirits were so crushed that they turned faceless. They lost everything that made them them, and they're only this vessel wandering the world, serving Gwi-Ma, nothing else. No autonomy, no thoughts, no feelings. Also, that's just how I interpret the faceless demons. Of course, we don't have true confirmation on what they're based on. They could also be based on Korean folklore, which is most likely like the egg ghosts, I think they're called. So he lost both of his friends, and he felt like he broke his promise. He did not know if Rumi was ever going to be safe with Celine, because he knew that Celine never really approved of Rumi. He knew that Rumi was going to struggle in a world that could never truly love her, because she had to hide who she was, and Celine was going to hide those qualities, push them back, make sure no one ever finds out about who and what she is and where she came from. So he lost his friend, he felt like he broke a promise, he gave a child to someone he did not trust, and he lost the approval of his king and his lover. So he genuinely didn't have anything left, and he fell into this dark pit, even darker than the underworld, because that is already dark enough in itself, but he was truly at his lowest during that time. There were only a few times where Seong was actually allowed to leave the demon realm, and he made sure to use the time to check up on Rumi's development. He knew that he could never actually be able to interact with her one-on-one. He always had to stay in the shadows and watch Celine raise her into the young woman that she eventually became in the movie. And just seeing her made him so happy, but he still felt bad that he could not directly protect her. He could only indirectly protect her as sort of like a demon guardian angel, which sounds very funny, but he just wanted to see the person she turned into, if it was all going well, and that's what he did. So Seong was sort of like Rumi's godfather, if you will. He could only protect her in the shadows because he made this promise to his friends after all, even though he could not act that promise out in a way that they had all hoped for. He still tried his best to do whatever he could in his position under his circumstances. One plot point I want to briefly mention, because it is very, very important to Seong's character, is that I've mentioned the 4 boys before, and there's a 5th boy, and that boy is Jinu. Jinu wasn't a soldier in the Joseon era, he was a musician. He entertained the high class, he entertained the Yangman society, the emperors. And Seong was also a nobleman, so he witnessed Jinu play for them. Jinu played for him as well at times, because he was part of that group of people. As we know, Seong is a queer man. How could one not be bewitched by someone like Jinu, someone with such a voice, with such a presence? Seong felt like he saw something in that man, in that young man, that just really attracted him. And in my AU, Jinu was not just a singer, he was an entertainer. He was a seductor. He was meant to bring pleasure to the nobleman. And that pleasure could also come in different ways, if you know what I mean. He was there to pleasure them, to entertain them. Seong saw potential in that. There was this playfulness in Jinu's eyes that Seong he couldn't resist it. And even though he was married, he could not say no to his indulgences, and he sought out Jinu's services in secret. And not being able to resist his urges only continued to fuel Seong's shame, because he knew he was betraying his wife by giving in to those needs, being self-indulgent, wanting to experience the pleasure that he could not otherwise receive properly. He wasn't attracted to women as he was supposed to in the society, and with Jinu he was able to actually make those experiences, like gay experiences, with another man. For Jinu, who was also going through a lot of stuff with his family, with his guilt of leaving his family behind, Seong was a distraction to him, an escape. So they both sought each other out for somewhat selfish purposes, but in a way they could never really see eye to eye on the matter. And as I've mentioned before, Seong was very selfish in most things, in most decisions that he made. And he sees himself as a savior, and he actually believed that he could save Jinu. Probably at some point he suggested they run away together. to live a peaceful life. But Jinu knew better that this was not going to work. This was a naive idea, and the audacity Song had to suggest how easy it could be, but it wasn't. So Song and Jinu were pretty much doomed from the start, because Song was just so naive with his suggestions, and Jinu somehow felt that Song didn't quite take him seriously, because to Song this relationship was still a very taboo thing, something he could never really truly live out, and he saw it as something to be kept secret, and Jinu just, it hurt him, of course it would. And Song somewhat tries to offer Jinu power by his side, but it was just such a romanticized version of the life that they could live that would never truly be possible. Jinu just didn't believe a word Song said, and even Song probably knew that this was not gonna be happening. So eventually, throughout this whole dilemma, Jinu and Song separate, and Jinu eventually disappears entirely, but of course Song did not know at the time that Jinu was taken by Gwi-Ma. Song was actually told that because of Song's depraved preferences for men, Jinu actually killed himself. That them being queer could never work out, that it would only lead to doom, because it was not meant to be that way. They were meant to be with women, they were meant to create children. Of course, that made Song feel so guilty. He only felt worse for being a queer man. It's really, really heavy to even talk about that. That actually brings us finally, at last, after this long, massive, sad journey, to the movie's events. And I know that you guys have all been looking forward to this, because this is where Bobby gets involved, and I would say that this is one of the few parts where Song's story actually gets wholesome for at least a while, so I'm glad we've reached that point. One massive detail that I haven't pointed out earlier, because I think it wasn't the right time to do so, was that the 4 boys were actually demons as well. They did not die forever. Gwi-Ma actually also took their souls. Upon finding out, Song begged Gwi-Ma to erase their memories, because he did not want them to know how they died. This is gonna go a little bit into Song's character analysis, which I would love to make a separate, more detailed video about if there is a request for that. But one might consider this to be very, very selfish of him, to take away the boys' autonomy to actually be the one to decide to have their memories erased. It's just that Song always felt so responsible for people's lives, and he did not realize that a lot of his actions were very driven by selfishness, and he always thought that he should be people's savior. He wanted to be Jinu's savior, but it was such a selfish, naive thought of him to want that without actually knowing or like taking the other people's perspectives, their struggles, their wants, their needs into consideration. He just wanted to be their savior, and when he couldn't be that, he fell into this pit. He felt so worthless, and it makes him kind of pathetic, and I love him for that. And especially in relation to the boys, I think it's really interesting, because Song felt like he failed them, and he couldn't bear the shame of that. So he was like, okay, why not just have the boys' memories erased, so that they have never remembered the shame of what I did to them, that I could not protect them, that I failed them. I already have to carry enough shame, and I cannot bear anyone else carrying that shame for themselves as well. So with all that put aside, Jinu eventually returns to Song's life in a way that I guess the both of them did not quite expect, because Jinu was very involved with the modern world. He spent a lot of time in the world of the living, where Song primarily stared down there with Gwi-Ma. He was very rigorous when it comes to modern knowledge. So when Jinu decided to make Gwi-Ma the offer of taking over Heartstrings' fans in order to finally destroy the Han Moon and get Gwi-Ma all the souls he needed in order to survive and become stronger, Gwi-Ma decided that it would be kind of fun to have Song be responsible for the boys a second time. I guess you could already tell that obviously these 4 boys, the Sasha boys, as they would be called now, were the 4 soldiers Seong was responsible for all those years back. In the movie, there were a few instances where you could sort of see that the boys had a very almost lobotomized state of mind. They had no thoughts at all. They really seemed like blank slates in a way. And I took that detail to insert into my AU, which is what I just explained and talked about, that their minds were erased. They were a blank slate, and now they would receive this new personality. They would be turned into this boy band, absolutely detached from their previous lives, because Jinu thought that they could be of help. And they were Jinu's first choice because he knew them personally in their previous lives with Seong. Seong and Jinu knew them personally back then. So maybe in a way he also just wanted his friends back. He wanted his friends to do this with him, and the circumstances around that are obviously very sad in my AU, as you can tell. Like, there's a lot of depth that goes into this. And like I said, Jinu knew a lot about the modern world. He lived in the upper world for so long. He studied them. He wanted to be part of them in a way, you know. He wanted to... he's still a young man, basically. Even though he's hundreds of years old, he was still young. He wanted to be fashionable. He wanted to be cool. He wanted to fit in. But Seong never really had that chance. He was so, like, drowned in his own emotions, and he was basically sort of a prisoner to Gwi-Ma's realm. He essentially wasn't allowed to ever leave his side if Gwi-Ma didn't specifically give permission. And part of Seong's nature just also never really wanted to leave, because he felt like he didn't deserve to ever visit that world of living again, because he had no part in it anymore. But now that the two were forced to work together, because Gwi-Ma was like, okay, Jinu, this idea sounds interesting, but you need someone to kind of oversee it, and I want to give my hobby a new chance, basically. Jinu was actually the one who did a lot of the creative work when it came to their performances, the way they market themselves. He knew what was cool in that time, and Seong had absolutely no clue. This man does not even know how to use a phone. So he was just like, okay, Jinu, you take care of this part. I just have to see that everything's going according to plan. I will report to Gwi-Ma as well. Whether you like it or not, I have to oversee you guys. I essentially have to parent you guys. So Jinu took it upon himself to actually turn Seong's miserable figure, his miserable sad appearance, into a modern-looking man, a very businessy man that would fit into the role of a manager, a boy band manager. And the funny thing is that while Seong's outfit is still very businesslike, as I said, he's wearing a turtleneck, he's wearing a blazer, he's very serious, because that's Seong's nature. He also wears a crop top turtleneck. It's not just a normal turtleneck, it's a crop top. You see his abs, you see his happy trail. And that just adds a certain amount of hotness that was just very self-indulgent and very fun for me to add, honestly. And I just love to imagine that this turtleneck idea was just a little tease coming from Jinu, being like, okay, let me just play with you a little, because I've always been playful with you in the past. And there's a lot of shit that has happened between us, but we're still the same deep down, and I think some of that playfulness deserves to come through with those two, even all these hundreds of years later, and I really like that. So with Jinu being the creative visionary of everything, the mastermind behind the actual idea, Seong sort of acted like a spokesperson, a representative, if that's how you call it, and that is what eventually made him cross paths with Bobby. And now we get to the really wholesome part I know you guys have been waiting for. And Seong, being the strategist that he is, sees that this has an effect he might not actually quite understand yet, because unfortunately Seong is very unaware of how good he looks, and that is a very funny detail to him that I really enjoy, because his like he's just so old, and this makes him kind of like clumsy when you insert him into a world he wasn't meant to live in. He was meant to essentially die hundreds of years ago. And I feel like that gives him a lot of charm and a lot of character aside from all the sadness. It adds this perfect balance of, okay, he's kind of like a bit awkward, and I just love that dynamic with Bobby especially. You have to remember that Seong is still very, very, like, almost like he imploded into himself. That's a very interesting way to describe it, but he's sort of like shrunken into his own sadness, his own depression. He has no interest in even letting anyone else in. He has no interest in interacting with these people, but he has to. And the moment Bobby and him meet, Seong most likely comes off as the most arrogant, uninterested, snobby person Bobby's ever met. And Bobby also gets that feeling. He's like, who the hell is that guy? Like, what is his deal? Why is he like that? But also, why the hell is he so hot? What's the deal with that? I hate him so much, but I can't stop staring at why is he wearing a turtleneck with a freaking crop top where I can see his freaking abs? And I think Jinu also notices that Bobby sort of can't stop staring at him, and there's this mixture of, okay, hatred and resentment and rivalry, because of course the Sasha boys are Heartstrings' rivals. So Bobby is in fighting mode, but he's so intrigued by this arrogant man and what his audacity is to come in there and try to take a spot and behave the way that he does. So while he had that idea to try to seduce Bobby because he saw that startledness that Bobby always experienced when they interacted, something also happened with Seong that is quite interesting, something that he's never felt before in those past 400 years of existing. And that was the softness of this small man's eyes. Like, something about those eyes just, it made Seong feel warmth, and he thought he would never feel this feeling again. He only felt the coldness of Gwi-Ma's flames, because I like to imagine that while Gwi-Ma's flames are flames, they feel cold. Because it's a negative feeling, coldness. It's like, I just really love that. So Bobby felt something in his existence that Seong has not really ever experienced from Gwi-Ma, because as we know, Gwi-Ma only knows how to be heavy-handed. He only knows how to show love through violence, essentially, and it's something that Seong also appreciated in its own way. But if there's a relationship and there's something missing and someone else shows you that part that you've always missed, it does something to you, and you realize that maybe what you've been experiencing for such a long time it's just not everything there is. So throughout the many collabs that, especially in this AU, the Sasha boys and Heartstrings have, it also meant that Bobby and Seong would interact more often, and they would actually start going on coffee meetings, or basically coffee dates in the end. They would just talk, and they would get closer. They would exchange business or deals. They would just talk business, you know, but eventually as you meet more often, you find out more about each other, and Seong was just bewitched by Bobby's softness, because he has never ever met someone like him, someone this soft, someone this selfless. And he just loved this man's like aura. He calmed him. He made the voices disappear, and he was just so inspired and so intrigued by the fact that Bobby was able to single-handedly manage this group of girls, and in a way it reflected how he once tried to take care of the 4 boys, but he failed them. So whilst knowing that Bobby was the enemy, he still wanted to know how he could possibly make up for failing his boys, how he could possibly not mess up again. But as you know, it's so conflicted because this was the enemy. Seong was like tasked to help destroy Heartstrings. And Bobby was their manager. He had to destroy Bobby as well if it was necessary. So the fact that Seong started feeling so deeply for the man he was meant to destroy, it obviously did not make Seong's task more easy. Seong's tasks are never easy. They haven't been easy in the last 400 years. Let's be real. The thing is that eventually Gwi-Ma started to sense that he was not quite able to reach Seong the way he used to be able to, because Bobby healed Seong. He sheltered his head away from Gwi-Ma's access. And that freaked Gwi-Ma out, even though he wasn't gonna admit that. And as we know, Gwi-Ma's first response to feeling any sort of emotion is to express anger. And I really need to make a character study video of my version of Gwi-Ma, because he's very, very deep as well. But he notices how his lover, his husband, his concubine, his soulmate, his general, his first in command, his loyal servant, his slave, his pet, fell in love with a mortal man, a soft mortal man. How that soft man distracted him from his purpose, and he felt like Seong was gonna fail again. And just a little detail, as you notice, Bobby is exactly what Gwi-Ma is not and what Gwi-Ma will never be able to be. And just keep that detail in mind for when I'm gonna do a character study of Gwi-Ma, because it's very important. It's a very important thing. So because Seong frequently hung out with Bobby against Gwi-Ma's will, Gwi-Ma decided to punish Seong regularly by showing up in his heart and causing him immeasurable pain in his heart. And Bobby, of course, had no clue what was going on. He feared that Seong had a sickness that he didn't tell Bobby about. And of course, Seong could never really tell, Bobby the truth. He was only ever able to tell half-truth, because the entirety of Seong's life is a lie, the life he pretended to have in front of Bobby. And Bobby's just such a poor man, because literally everyone in his life is lying to him. His own girls are lying to him. They don't tell him what they actually do. Celine lies to him. Bobby is entirely clueless, and he is such a sweet and gentle soul, and he doesn't deserve this, man. And Seong he also couldn't tell him the truth, obviously he could not. And the thing is that, of course, they do this to protect him. They do not want any harm to come to him, because Bobby is the least deserving of any harm, to be honest. Gwi-Ma probably also found this very amusing, because, of course, due to the guilt that Seong experienced by being in love with a man he could not be honest with, his shame grew again. Seong is constantly confronted with his own shame, and there's so many, sources of that shame in Seong's life, constantly. He kept calling Bobby Seong's little pet, Seong's little distraction from what he was actually supposed to do, and he kept telling him, yeah, just enjoy this while it lasts. Just enjoy this little indulgence, because you're gonna lose it eventually anyway. You're gonna lose this guy. So while Seong was struggling with his own emotions, Jinu actually also struggled with his own in relation to Rumi, and as we know, Seong also had a relation to Rumi that Rumi didn't even know about, because when the two interacted all those years back, Rumi was still a toddler. She was just a child. She had no memory of Seong. She didn't know that Seong was her godfather, in a way, that her parents wanted Seong to protect her. Seong also had to fight Rumi. He didn't only have to fight Bobby, he also had to fight her. And in a way, Gwi-Ma put Seong to the test one final time. He was like, okay, can you finally do what I ask you to do? Kill the hunters, finally succeed in anything, in any task I give you. And the more conflicts arose, the more suspicious Bobby also grew, because he felt that Seong had a lot of mysteries to him, and There were so many unanswered questions, and Seong just couldn't talk about himself, and Bobby sensed that there was something very wrong, and he feared that Seong might do something to himself, because of course, when you see a man in such a state, in such a conflict, and in such a sad, and such a depressed, and such a frustrated state, you think that he's genuinely depressed, and I mean, Seong is, but there's so much more to that. Someone as kind as Bobby, of course, starts worrying, because like, why don't you talk to me? Please talk to me, please, I want to help you. So again, there were these horrible, incredibly difficult choices to be made by Seong. He wanted his boys to finally survive, to finally make it for once. But on the other hand, Rumi existed, Bobby existed, these mortal people, these living people mattered so much. And how were you ever gonna decide between saving the boys, like saving people you really cared for that you already felt like you failed in the past, or choosing the ones that you met in the living world? That living people, they still live, that deserve to continue to live. And even Jinu was faced with similar choices, because on one hand he cared a lot about Rumi and he wanted this to end, but on the other hand he was also driven by selfish needs. He wanted those memories erased, he wanted his horrible actions to be erased. Throughout the Saja boys' interference, hand tricks of course also come across Seong eventually. And they do realize that Seong has some plans with Bobby, that he's affecting Bobby in some way, that he's distracting Bobby and essentially endangering him. So they intend on stopping Seong from harming Bobby, but they don't of course see that Bobby doesn't intend to harm Bobby. It's just, he's a demon, of course they're gonna wanna fight him, because to them all demons are evil. But of course Seong looks at Rumi differently, because he knows her parents, but she doesn't know him, and still she notices that this man, like, he looks at her with a certain softness that she finds quite unsettling naturally. So eventually there's a little subplot with Seong and Rumi where these two sort of discover who the other is. Oh well, Seong, he's tentative when it comes to revealing Rumi's past and the truth about her parents and Celine, because of course he knows how overwhelming this can be, and he never really intended to actually directly interact with Rumi, but still he wants to protect her, so it's very complicated. Like, he scares her, she doesn't want to believe him, she's like, who are you, why are you suddenly here and telling me all this stuff? I'm already overwhelmed enough as is. So sadly, all that Seong ends up achieving is scaring Rumi off. She doesn't want to hear any more of this, but still, of course, these words brew in her head and they won't easily leave her, but it's just too much at the time, and this is basically where their relationship ends for now. But still, Seong was glad that he was able to tell Rumi the truth before either they perished or he perished, and it was important for him to get that closure, no matter if Rumi was going to hate him or not believe him. It was freeing for him to do that. It was important for him to do that in case he didn't get the chance to anymore, depending on who would end up winning in this war, in this battle. And it's just such a frustrating way this plot goes, because in order to protect Bobby, Seong decides to distance himself again, and Bobby doesn't understand, because how could he? All he sees is someone who all of a sudden pretends like he hates him. He keeps his distance all of a sudden, even though they grew so close over the course of the movie's events. They had a relationship, essentially. They really loved each other. But Seong, the like pathetic man that he is, of course he could not bear to see Bobby hurt, so he literally walked away. He turned away from Bobby because he could not face the fact that Bobby was most likely going to die, because his soul was going to be taken. And the thing that just really intrigues me when it comes to Seong is that he is genuinely not a hero. He fails all the time throughout his entire lore video, like throughout this entire lore video. He has failed multiple times. He felt like he failed multiple times, but still there's so much care within him, and still he makes the wrong decisions. And I think that's incredibly human, even though he's a demon. And I think you know what I'm kind of like fascinated by here. It's just he feels so realistic to me, because heroes don't always have to exist in the conventional manner, and sometimes it's sort of comforting to see a man just try, but he's put into so many different, like, difficult situations. How is any decision he makes ever the correct one or the wrong one, you know? It's like, it's always either wrong or right. Nothing could be right, actually. It just gets even worse when you consider that Seong's entire life was pre-written for him by a certain someone, by U-Jin, and the moment I make a video about U-Jin in particular, you're gonna get a lot of like closure on what exactly he did and why he did it, and it's really, really, really evil. And Seong had no choice in the matter. He was U-Jin's pawn ever since he was born, essentially, because U-Jin is ancient. He's an ancient demon. He's over 700 years old. He has been there long before Seong was even conceived. He was there when his parents were children. But U-Jin's story is going to be part of a separate video because, of course, the story continues post-movie events. And this is where I'm gonna have to draw the line, because I cannot make this video 3 hours long, even though I would love to, but I guess it just kind of maybe hypes you up for more stuff to come eventually. But speaking of U-Jin, I know I haven't talked about him a lot in this video, and that is because I want to keep him elusive for now. But he actually told the boys what happened to them, what Seong did to them. And the thing is that one of the boys is actually U-Jin's son. So there's a connection there, and U-Jin managed to get closer to the boys. And through that revelation, morale is at its lowest. The boys lose trust in Seong, and Seong trained them for the past months. He prepared them for this final fight, but now there was mistrust, there was chaos. They were absolutely disheveled by the fact that their memories were erased, that they died in battle with Seong. And Seong never told them, because he just wanted to protect them in a way. And the thing is that Gwi-Ma was also in on this plot. Gwi-Ma actually helped kill the boys in this battle. U-Jin and Gwi-Ma killed the boys. And there's a reason for that, and that reason is to break down Seong's spirit. And it's so horrible. It really is. And Seong didn't know that. He finds out that his king and his mentor, people he was supposed to look up to, people he was supposed to admire, they did this to him on purpose. So this just, it gave Seong the rest, and he entirely gave up. So this leaves us with the fact that now Seong is entirely destroyed. He was always destroyed, but he was never as destroyed as this. And the fact that Bobby and Tim split up, and Bobby doesn't even know why that happened. He has no explanation whatsoever, and he is incredibly sad about it. He's confused, he's angry. And all of this, of course, happens short before the Idol Awards, as well as the Your Idol performance at the end of the movie. So there's a lot of things piling up, a lot of stuff that Seong is going through, Rumi's going through, Jinu's going through, Bobby is going through. All of them are going through hell, even Gwi-Ma is, because for him it's about life and death, or well, being free or being condemned to the demon realm forever once again. And once again, Seong feels like it's all up to him. Why does he have to be the one to be the resolution of whatever the outcome is going to be? Either he defies his king, he goes against his king, and his king dies. His boys probably die as well, maybe he dies as well. You just don't know what happens if Gwi-Ma is killed. But on the other hand, you also just, you want the people you care about to continue living. And this plot point is the plot point where I myself find myself conflicted, because there is a lot of options for me to choose when it comes to how this ends, and especially how it continues, because there is a whole plot line I have post-movie, but the transition period from the end of the movie to that period of time is still kind of like a mishmash of different ideas for me that I have to gather my thoughts on, and I talk a lot about it with my friends, because it's a very interesting time, especially for Seong, Bobby, and Gwi-Ma. So I'm just gonna list 2 of the ideas that I had for how this might end at the end of the movie. So the initial idea I had was that, based on the reel I made very, very early on, is that upon Gwi-Ma's destruction by Rumi's sword, with Jinu's soul in it, Seong also perishes, and they both get condemned to the demon realm again. And they are prisoner there together, and Seong is basically entirely stripped of anything he ever cared about. Like, he becomes this absolutely evil, soulless being, and like there's no purpose left for him, because like he got detached from Bobby, and it's just it's a very bad, a very dark time for him. And it's almost like he has a whole corruption arc where he actually starts working on a boy band army with Gwi-Ma, and the concept of that still very like much intrigues me. But I also have another idea, and like I said, I talked about this a lot with friends, so huge shout out to them for like helping me figure out parts of the story. It's like, this is sometimes like it's a very like collaborative effort, because my friends have a lot of incredible ideas that I am super thankful for, so huge shout out to them for this. But the other idea that we sort of discussed was that Gwi-Ma essentially perishes, or well, people think he perished, but you have to remember that a part of Gwi-Ma's flame is what is still inside Seong, and that is the last remainder of Gwi-Ma, the Demon King. And only Seong knows about the fact that Gwi-Ma is still there, and he doesn't tell anyone, because there's obviously this very layered relationship between the two, and he's still loyal, and he also knows that Gwi-Ma is probably also what still keeps him alive. And it's a very codependent and a very desperate time, and I really think I prefer this plot point, because it once again shows that Seong has more morally corrupt ways to him still in relation to Gwi-Ma that I find very fascinating. But he's also able to continue his relationship with Bobby, because everyone thinks that this might be over. Like, he gets to live a life with Bobby, they get to mend whatever they messed up earlier, like whatever Seong didn't talk about with him. Like, they talk a lot about what happened, and Seong apologizes, so they get to build up the relationship. But Gwi-Ma is still within Seong, and there's still their relationship there, the loyalty that Seong has to him. And I really want to explore this, because there's so much nuance to this again, so much to analyze when it comes to Seong's decisions. And I've mentioned several times that Seong has this incredibly frustrating, sort of annoying savior complex to him, and people just probably wouldn't believe why the heck Seong would develop a savior complex for Gwi-Ma, but that is a thing to talk about when I make Gwi-Ma's character analysis video, which I think is going to be very important for me to do, because there's aspects to him that are very important in relation to Seong, and what Seong means to him, and what Seong actually did to him as well, how he changed him upon the bond that they made all those years ago. Okay, so I know that this has been a very, very long video, and please take your time to process all the information I've just thrown at you with my yapping. But if there's anything you want to know regarding Seong's ships, Seong's dynamics with the other characters, please let me know in the comments below, because there's so much worth talking about, so much to analyze, and I love talking about him because he's my pride and joy. I consider him somewhat of a son of mine, if you will. So yeah, just let me know if you have any questions, and I would love to make more videos about him and about his story, about the other characters involved in his story. And of course, if you want to see more art of mine, more reels of mine for Seong, Make sure to follow my socials. I am Niku30_ pretty much everywhere, mostly on Instagram currently, because I post a lot to my stories there, and you're not gonna wanna miss out on those, because they're really fun, if I do say so myself. I love making stories. And before I conclude this video, I just want to give a shout out to some absolutely incredible friends of mine. These people have been my literal backbone for the past year, and I am so eternally grateful that I've made these new friends because of Seong, because of my AU. They've drawn so much incredible fan art for me. They've been so supportive. We've had so much fun together, and the fanfics that have been written, I don't even have the words. I just love these guys so much. So please do give them a follow, do check them out. Please give them all the appreciation that they deserve, because they mean the world to me. I love you guys so much, like, I've also made sure to link all their socials in the caption, so please take a look at it. And I've also made sure to link a few fanfics that I absolutely recommend, because they give such a complex, such a beautifully depicted picture of Seong as a character and Seong's relationships with Gwi-Ma, with Jinu, with like Bobby. It's absolutely incredible what these friends, these amazing people have done for me. Just out of pure appreciation for this story. I'm about to start crying, I'm not even gonna lie. So if you're actually still here, and if you've watched the video up to this point, let me just tell you that I love you very much, and I really hope to see you in the next video. Until then, I will see you online, I guess. Bye!